Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you for the love and attention that my last video got. The one going over, the unlocked XTX with unlimited power limit. I'm definitely planning on doing some more videos with that. Going over, like, to actually testing, like, a suite of games, like multiple different games. Somebody commented that Helldivers would definitely crash with my settings, so I'm definitely going to give that a shot. See if he's right, or if my settings are in fact rock solid, you know. With stuff like that, I generally have like it's like if every game runs, but then like one crashes, is it like the game's fault, kind of, or is it actually the overclock? Because some games are kind of weird with that, where like I feel like if 9 games run and then one has like this hitch every now and again, it's like, the night like should we count the outlier, or should we say our settings are generally stable because because 9 other games are perfectly stable on the, but regardless, like that's obvious. People have opinions on that or whatever, because at the end of the day, it could be a game problem, it could actually be an overclock problem. But regardless, we're talking about RAM timings today. DDR5 regular RAM timings. So here I have my DDR5 expo on this kit is 6030, 36, 36, 78, I believe, for primaries. So primaries, pretty much, that's TCL, TRCD, WR, TRCD, RD. Those are, and TRP. Those are your, wait on, well, and TRAS. Or I don't know, TRP. Listen, I'm not like by any means an expert when it comes to DDR5 overclocking. That would be more of like an actually hardcore overclocking his channel kind of thing. He's very in depth. He knows definitely way more than I do, but I do have like, I have enough experience and I guess knowledge to be able to like overclock my RAM pretty like efficiently, I feel like. So and I, before showing you all of these timings, okay, now if you decide to take these timings and slap it into your computer, right? I don't know if your computer will post. I do not, I do not know if this will work on any of your, I suspect it would work on a good amount of like Hynix A and M, definitely A die. I think Hynix A die would definitely like post with my settings. M die, it's a 50-50, because M die you could either get like a rough batch that is only really capable of doing Expo or maybe CL28. CL28 might be just the limit of your kit. But the thing about Hynix, what I've seen on Reddit, what I've read online, is Hynix scales very well with voltage. And so if you like look online, if you go to ChatGPT and ask what are like safe voltages for DDR5, it'll say anywhere from like 1.35 to 1.45, and it'll say 1.45 is at the like top safe range generally. Now, if you have like a case that has like zero cooling, like you are in like a mini ITX sort of build, right? You only have like a couple of fans blowing air. You have a hot GPU blowing air on your RAM or whatever, and that air is not getting evacuated, or like enough clean air, cool air is not getting blown into your case. Then yeah, 1.45 might be the max that you really want to go, because you're just not getting any. Because Hynix, or really, I don't really know about Samsung. I haven't done too much research on Samsung, but what it seems like DDR5 in general is pretty heat sensitive. So if you're getting up to 70 degrees, 75 degrees on your RAM, that's getting up there. Like, it's not dangerous or anything, but like it could make your timing suffer as a result of that excess heat, you know? Now once you get up to like 80, 85, then you're literally, you're cooking your RAM, damn near, you're probably gonna struggle to get good timings. You're probably gonna, Expo might not even work, because DDR5 is just simply, temperatures it's just sensitive to temp, which that's just, it is what it is. It's kind of the same with VRAM, even on a GPU. Like, on the XTX, the GDDR, or not GDDR, the yeah, the GDDR6 on my XTX is heat sensitive enough to where like if my RAM modules were probably around like 60C, like, you know, on like water cooling or something, I could probably run like 2800 with maybe a little bit of voltage. But because I'm on air, my RAM hits around 78, 80, even goes to 81, 82. Now on VRAM, that's generally fine. Like that's not any sort of like horrible territory where your RAM's going to degrade and this and that. It's just going to affect how fast you can potentially push it. And yeah, like RAM is just generally heat sensitive from what I've read online, no matter what type of RAM it really is. And honestly, that's really with everything, right? Like GPUs, if they're hitting that hotspot, they're not able to hold their clocks, right? I mean, it is like an artificial limit, but once you get up there, like things could get a little unstable. That's why people going for world records, they run under liquid nitrogen, right? Same with CPUs. Like all silicon is generally heat sensitive, but DDR5 when it comes to like tightening timings is seems to be like very sensitive. So anyways, here are my timings. I'm not gonna act like I know exactly what each setting does or means. Okay, I just know that lower is better. Okay, generally as long as everything's stable. As long as everything's stable. Now there are some values where you have to. Okay, in your BIOS, right? Even if you just leave on Expo, turn off gear down mode, okay, turn off power down enable, and turn down memory context or turn off memory context restore. Turn all of those settings off. Okay. Gear down mode, I'm not gonna lie, I did ask ChatGPT what exactly gear down mode did because I knew from what I read on with that was that the command time instead of being 1T to 2T between the memory and the memory controller. So like apparently the memory controller will only request like a read write or something along those lines every 2 cycles. But with gear down disabled, it's every 1 cycle, which just lowers latency a little bit. It's not like a game changer by any means, but it like I would I would turn it off because it can make your RAM a little bit slower. Now, if you run into some crazy instability, then obviously I'd rather have a stable system than you know than have a slightly faster system. Like I think everyone could probably agree with that. Now, power down enable and memory context restore. I don't know what memory context restore does, but I do know power down enable. It's like a power saving feature in Windows where the RAM can like lower its speeds pretty much in order to like conserve power or something along those lines. Now, okay, with these settings, I'm 95% sure my kit is Hynix M die because my kit wasn't expensive. Normally Hynix A die is the more expensive kits, the like tighter timing kits. Now, 6000 CL30 is like pretty, it's generally tight timings in terms of all DDR5 RAM, but like they're not anything crazy. I feel like M-Die would be more like the CL28 RAM kits, you know, the CL26 RAM kits. That's going to be A-Die. So I'm pretty sure that I have M-Die. So with M-Die, it just means it's like it's slightly worse than A-Die. Not by, I don't think it's by some like crazy margin. You're not going to notice a huge difference in games. Generally, when it comes to RAM timings, you're aiming to what it will help with is 1% lows, right? Especially on non-X3D chips. If you have a 9800 X3D or a 7800 X3D, odds are your 1% lows, your frame rates are not gonna really have any sort of impact from tuning RAM. Maybe a little bit, maybe a wee bit, but pretty much the reason for that is because X3D chips have such big cache that a lot of the, like a lot of information can be stored on that cache, so it doesn't necessarily need to be sent over to RAM. On regular CPUs, like I have a 7700X, the CPU will have to send information over to the memory because it just doesn't have as big of a cache. Pretty simple, right? And because of that, non-X3D CPUs, anything without an X3D will benefit significantly with tightening RAM timings, especially in the like 1%, 0.1% lows, all that kind of stuff. Your game's going to feel smoother. And in my opinion, a smooth game is more important than a super high FPS game that stutters. Way more important. You're going to have a way more enjoyable experience at 100 FPS with zero stutters versus 200 with stutters every few seconds, or it just doesn't feel smooth. So, yeah. Anyways, so we're going to go over these. TCL26, pretty tight, right? Pretty, like, generally tight for, like, a Hynix M die at 6. Nothing crazy. I've seen way more impressive timings, but even compared to the easy memory overclocking, or actually hardcore overclocking on the easy DDR5 memory timings and everything, I feel like, oh my God, I just lost my train of thought. But like, compared to what his timings were, I feel like, especially with primaries, these are generally like tight. Now, for his video, he was trying to aim that towards a very broad audience, because like his timings will pretty much work with every kid. He didn't touch primary timings or anything like that. And I think the reason why that is because with primaries, you do have to up voltage. You do have to up the voltage. Right now, it doesn't say it here. I might be able to actually pull up hardware info, but it doesn't say it right here, but I'm running 1.57 volts on my DRAM, which is perfectly fine. Like, everywhere that I read, people are saying, some people are running up to 1.8 volts with cooling. And the fact that my RAM, even under heavy load, even under very heavy load, I'm not seeing above like 50 degrees. So I'm perfectly, here you go. Yeah, 1.575, 1.575, 1.575. So don't, if you're into, RAM overclocking, don't be afraid to up that voltage a little bit. I would say stick to below 1.6 volts. For an everyday system, like, if you're, like, don't forget, if you decide to overclock your system, this is at, like, your own risk, right? This is, you're the one changing the values and everything. But as long as you stay really, like, between, below, like, one, I feel like the absolute limit of, like, somebody who isn't a serious overclocker, who doesn't want the absolute, like, bleeding edge type of timings where, like, they're as tight as they can possibly go, I feel like 1.65 is generally about as high as you would want to ever go on, like, a daily system that you do not want to generally degrade, right? Especially if your timings are good. I mean, if your temps are good, then there's no reason why you shouldn't up the voltage. There's just no real reason. Like, and if you go on the overclocking subreddit, there's people pushing way higher voltages all the time. I see 1.65, 1.60. So I feel like with 1.57, well, as you can see, the VDD is going up to 1.59. I'm really not, like, nervous about serious degradation occurring at these voltages. Especially with just, like, there's a lot of people that have overclocked DDR5. So if these voltages were unsafe, people would definitely be screaming and yelling and saying, do not do this. But people are not, right? With Hynix, it scales very well with higher voltages. So if you want to, remember, at your own risk, but you're not going to really, I think even at 1.75, none of y'all's RAM is going to be, like, at any immediate danger, or even really any danger at all, as long as temps stay in control. Now, if you try pushing 1.6 volts and your DDR5 is hitting 85, 90C, is that a good idea? Probably not. But if you have really good airflow, right? Like, I'm in the Liam Lee V3000 case with 5 120 millimeter fans blowing cold air in. I actually don't have an exhaust fan. I do want to do some testing on that to see how much an exhaust fan helps or hurts, because so far with all of my fans as intake, it's like my temps are great, but especially on DRAM, my RAM beforehand, before getting the 120 millimeter fans, they would hover around like 57 degrees, 58 degrees. And now after getting the fans, they're at like 48. So pretty much a 10-degree just shave off, just from getting some just from getting, and it's not even directly on the RAM either. But regardless, it's important to have good cooling is my point. Anyways, so yeah, if you want to try these timings, you can, right? But you are gonna, if you're on Hynix M die, even Hynix A die with like the TCL26 is pretty tight timings for DDR5. So you are gonna have to up your voltage to like at least I would try if I were y'all, I would try 1.55. See if that's stable. If it's not stable, up it to like 1.57, right? And then if that's not stable, up it to 1.58, because for what happened to me is I did 1.55 with these timings, 1.55 volts, on VDD and VDDQ, right? And I was right at the cusp of stability, right at the edge where I got through Y cruncher and then it randomly errored, right? Like I got through multiple stages of Y cruncher and then it errored. So like at that point, it's kind of just like, okay, we're pretty much at that point where the RAM is stable, but we need to give it a little bit more voltage just to give it that mild bump into that perfectly stable zone. And on these settings at 1.57, 1.58, I was running testmin 5 for a fat minute. Okay. It hasn't been like, I also ran some Y cruncher too, a few, like, and it lasted much longer. I am going on these settings. I am going to do like a 8-hour stress test, or at least like a few hours to make sure that this is like generally stable. But yeah, like on uh, from upping that voltage, I'm like 95% sure that these settings are going to be 100% stable. But I do need to test that. If they're not stable, they are like right at the edge, but they should be, because at 1.55 volts, everything was perfectly stable, and I'm up to 1.59 as you can see. So, anyways, here we go. Speed 6,000 megatransfers per second. GDM disabled, right? Make sure that that's disabled. Power down disabled, right? I don't know if memory context restore is on here. Regardless, anyways, TCL is at 26. TRC, can I make this bigger? Nope. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, TCL 26, TRC DWR 35, TRC DRD 35, TRP 35, TRAS 70, TRC 68. And so from, let's see, a lot of okay, TRFC, that was one of the timings that I changed, was from like 580 or something like that, and I lowered that down to 430. So if you wanted to go ahead and try that, you can try that. A lot of these timings are stock expo, though. I was focusing mainly on primary timings, and just to kind of show that like primaries scale very well on Hynix with more voltage, and you're not necessarily going to kill your DRAM just because you push higher voltage than, like 1.35 is extremely conservative, like to the point to where your RAM chips will probably never degrade ever. Like, of course they would after a while. And okay, TREFI up to 65,000. I think most Hynix RAM kits can probably do this, especially if you have well-cooled RAM. Once again, if your RAM's getting hot, you might be throwing errors if you try to run 65,000. See, TREFI, I don't really know what this, because I don't see this in BIOS, right? So if y'all want to like throw something in the comment, if y'all know better than me, TREFI, I don't know why this says 21,000, right? I'm not 100% sure. And also make sure you in BIOS, UCLK equals memclk. That pretty much just means that the like 7900 XTX memory controller is running at half the speed of the RAM. And then FCLK, I'm sure if you watched actually hardcore overclocking, you would know that DDR5 is permanently desynchronized from the Infinity fabric, where FCLK runs at 2000 instead of 3000. So, and then with VDDIO, this is one thing I didn't understand with like BuildZoid's tutorial on easy memory, like overclocking or whatever, is why his VDDIO was so high. he put it up to 1.35, and that's just the memory controller voltage. That's not like that doesn't have anything to do with um the actual like RAM chips or anything like that. So I don't know why he pushed the voltage up so high, but you don't need to push voltage up that high. Um Up to like 1.35 or 1.4. You could probably just get away with 1.25. If you notice some instability for whatever reason, you can maybe bump that up to 1.27, but that's just going to create, like unneeded heat, really, once you get like too high with that. It doesn't really help with any sort of RAM stability unless you go way too low. And then that's just memory controller instability, like that's pretty much. Um, so yeah, I mean, y'all see the timings, right? If you want to give them a shot, you can, but it is at your own risk. Try if you have Hynix M die. This is the specific kit of RAM that I have. All right. And I will say latency went down from 67, 68 nanoseconds with primaries not tuned down to 60. 60. That's why I wanted to make a video on this, because when I saw that decrease in latency, I like could not believe it. I was like 8, like what? What am I even like looking at right now? That is like a huge shaving of latency, huge. In the world of like DDR5. So let's see if I can find my DRAM kits. You know what? Why am I not? They're just T4. Like they're not special RAM kits, right? They're not. Matter of fact, a lot of people might say that these are like lower quality. They're cheaper, right? They're only $100. That ain't nothing, man. Like in terms of RAM, right? Like, yeah, they got a nice RGB strip, but does that have anything to do with the memory chips? No, you know. Um, but definitely I would not go for something like this. Like spend the extra 15, $16 on like a tighter timing RAM kit, right? Do not spend your money on a CL38 DDR5 6000 RAM kit. That's probably Samsung. You don't want Samsung memory, okay? Yeah, here you go. A white RAM stick, boom, doesn't have RGB for 94. Here you go. Right? Wait, what? 2 times 8. Oh, yeah, no, you don't want that. Oh, wait, hold on. Never mind. That's DDR4. Let's see. Here you go. They got the CL28 kit. Not worth it. As you can see, with a little more voltage, I got CL26. And, if you're like, don't be scared of those higher voltages. ChatGPT will tell you that they're unsafe. They're not unsafe. People have, like, a lot of people have experience with overclocking DDR5 at this point. I think we would know if, the fact that people are running 1.75, 1.8 volts. Now, granted, that is with active memory cooling. That is with, like, a fan on the RAM. Like, fans on the RAM, keeping the RAM cool. But that's what I'm saying. Below, like, with 1.65 and below, I feel like that's generally safe for even not having RAM cooling. If you have a good case, good fans already, you should be fine up to 1.65, right? So yeah, this is my exact RAM kit, right? Not DDR5 6000, right? PC5 48,000, CL30, boom. And like I said, it's CL30, 36, 36, 78. Right now we have this lowered to 26, 35, 35, 35, 70. I think these are the same, right? 26, 35. This would be the same, like in BIOS or whatever, and then 35, 70. So I'm gonna try to lower these values, right? This is kind of like I'm not gonna lie, this is kind of like a raw dog overclock. I haven't spent like days memory testing it or whatever, and I do need to tighten some of these secondaries. I realize that I'm going to tighten these secondary timings and get everything in order. But I really was more interested in primary timings because I feel like they just make a really large difference in latency. So, and I don't care what anyone says, primary timings are going to be like your most important timings that you're going to want to tighten up, right? Like you can spend all day doing secondaries, which they might, which will help. Don't get me wrong. Secondaries will help, but your primaries, that's going to be what really lowers that latency. Especially if you can get it stable, right? If it's unstable, not going to be great latency or whatever. But yeah, so pretty much, if you want to go ahead and slap, or if you want to go ahead and slap these settings in, this is definitely going to be faster than Expo, way faster than Expo, especially with the primaries tuned. But with the secondary, that like, if you wanted to, you could try. Okay, go to actually hardcore overclocking's video, easy DDR5 timings, and copy his secondary timings. For me, for some reason, one of his values wasn't exactly stable, so I decided to just enable Expo and decide to tune my primary timings. And so far, that's gone great. Latency has gone down, but I haven't reapplied his secondary timings. So if you wanted to apply my primary timings and then apply, especially if you have Hynix, right? If you have Samsung, you're not going to boot, right? You're not going to boot at all. And then apply his secondary timings at one point. At that point though, you may need 1.6 volts. I don't know. But like I said, that is up to you. That is, you are liable or whatever. So, but I think a lot of kids could probably do something like this, and your 1% lows and 0.1% lows are going to, are going to definitely benefit from it. And, like, I probably don't have any sort of crazy set of RAM, right? Like, I probably don't have some crazy bin set of MDI or anything like that. I feel like I probably have just a general, normal set of MDI. Not bad, not great, just kind of normal, right? So I feel like a lot of people would be able to run similar timings to this, even without the tuned secondaries, and get way better latency, way better 1% lows, and definitely make sure TREFI is up to like at least 50,000. Definitely up that to 50,000. Make sure. Normally with Expo they do up that value. So, all right. Anyways, guys, that's pretty much my video. Happy RAM overclocking. Have a good time doing it. Definitely worth doing. It's definitely worth doing, in my opinion. I mean, you're unlocking free 1% free performance, especially if you don't have an X3D chip. What is stopping you? And now that we pretty much know that Hynix doesn't degrade, as long as you don't push voltages to the extreme, like 1.8 volts on no active memory cooling, you'll be fine. You're not gonna degrade your chips, right? And by the time they may be degraded a little bit, you'll probably be ready to freaking upgrade your system anyways, right? Like at my settings, I have no doubt that they would last until AMD changes their socket, right? Which is in 2027, right? Is when they officially said that they would support it till. So, give it a shot. Give some RAM overclocking a shot. Is it tedious? Is it kind of annoying sometimes? Yes, you're gonna have to possibly reset BIOS, right? But if you have a CL30 kit and you go down to CL28 or CL26, CL28, I believe for me worked at 1.47 or 1.45 volts, something like that. I can't remember exactly. And CL26, I had to bump that up to 1.5, obviously 1.57, and it's like sticking right around 1.59, 1.58. So give it a shot. You know what I mean? I wouldn't be scared to do it, right? You're unlocking performance. That's what I'm all about. Unlocking every single bit of performance you possibly can out of your system. It almost makes me want to like not even go X3D, because like it makes me like being able to get that performance bump from overclocking RAM is like exciting for some reason. I don't know. But yeah, anyways, y'all, thank y'all for watching. Hopefully you found this video entertaining and or informative in some type of way. And I'll be back soon. All right, see ya.